In this Map Suite MVC Edition sample app walkthrough, we're going to show you how to do spatial queries with different shapes or feature sets. As we've got our sample application set up here, you'll see we've just got a regular base map with the world map kit displayed, and we've also got another shapefile sitting on top of that with the country boundaries. You can kind of see them outlined in green. And then we've got another feature here, just a big rectangle kind of floating over half the world here. This is just sitting in a memory feature layer. And we're going to show you how to do various spatial queries of this rectangle shape against country boundaries. And you can use spatial querying for all sorts of things to find out, whether a point is inside of a polygon or to find intersections. Really, there's a lot of uses for spatial querying. And this sample application is just touching on a few of the basic concepts. So to get started, let's see some of the different types of spatial queries we can do here. And the first one we got is within. So when I select that, what we're doing is we're trying to find any of the countries that are fully within this rectangle shape. So if any portion of the country is outside of that rectangle, it's not going to be selected. So you can see here we've only selected the countries that are completely within inside that rectangle shape. The next one is containing, and for this example, no countries are displayed because this rectangle shape is not contained fully by any of the countries. So if we had a little small rectangle and it fit within Brazil here, and we ran this tool, you would see Brazil light up in that case. But since this is such a large rectangle, no countries fully contain that. The next one is disjointed, and disjointed shows all the countries completely outside of this rectangle. So if any portion of any country falls within this, it's not going to be returned, but if all of it is completely outside of it, it will be. So as you can see, there's many countries outside of this, but even Algeria comes down here and touches a little bit, and Libya, and the United States, there must be a territorial island or something out here in the Atlantic that's covered by that rectangle, and that's why it's not being displayed. So that's another powerful spatial query rule. The next one we've got is intersecting, and that's going to return any shapes that have any portion intersecting this this rectangle. So as you can see, it contains any that are inside it, or even if a portion of it intersects accordingly. So that's good to know. And then we've got overlapping, which that one is just where the border of the rectangle shape overlaps with the border of another country. So you can see here, this is just getting all the ones that kind of go along the edge of this rectangle, but the internal countries that are completely within the rectangle aren't returned. So that's another type of spatial query. And then the last two aren't going to return any results for this sample, but if it was topological equal, so if you had two features that were taking up the same topological space, they would be returned in. And then touching would mean that they are exactly adjacent to each other, which again in this scenario, there are no countries returned. So let's take a look at the source code so you can see how to set up spatial queries and what APIs you would use to do these types of spatial queries. So to get started, let's just look at how this sample app is set up. And here, when the application is loaded, we're doing a few things, such as setting up the world map kit as our base map, adding the shapefile feature layer for the country boundaries, and then we've got our in-memory feature layer, which is containing that gigantic rectangle over the world that we're using for our spatial query. And then down here we're setting up another in-memory feature layer that will contain our spatial query results later on. So those are when those red countries get returned back, they're getting loaded into this layer. So you can see all the rendering logic and styling and all of that is defined here. And then we're just adding those layers to the map and rendering it out to the page. The actual spatial query is happening when the user selects one of the options in the drop-down box. So as you can see, here's where that drop-down box is defined, and on the onChange event, we're going to call this JavaScript method up here called spatial query and pass in the selection that was selected. So when that happens, the user selects it. The first thing we do is get the value selected, and then we're going to do an AJAX callback to the server using the AJAX call action method off of the map. and pass in what controller we want to use on the server and what method. And we're also going to pass in the type of query we want to do. And once we get the result back from the server, we're going to call this callback function to just redraw the overlay so we see the updated results. So let's go to the server side now where the spatial query is occurring and take a look here at the spatial query method. And this first part's just getting some references to our layers, our world layer, our rectangle layer, and our results layer. And then we want to go ahead and get that rectangle feature, that big one that we have kind of hovering over the world there, because that's what we're going to use for a lot of our spatial queries. And we're going to create a collection to hold our results, and then we're going to get this query type basically or passed in from the client from what the user selected in the drop-down box. Once we have that done, we're going to open up our world layer that contains all of our countries so we can do a spatial query on it. And then we've got a case statement here for all the different types of spatial queries that match what we have on the client side in the drop-down box. So as you can see, we're doing a case on those depending upon what value the user selected. So, and then all of our spatial queries are off of the Query Tools API. And you can see we've got several methods such as get features within, get features containing, get features disjointed, and so on. And each one of these we're going to pass in the rectangles feature, so you have full control over which features you want to do your spatial query on. And if you want to get back to column values for any of the features, you can do that as well. In this case, we're not getting any ones back because we're just passing in the empty string array. I typically go ahead and return all column values in case you want to use them, display in a grid or a pop-up or something along those lines. But in the sample, we're not returning any. Once we get the results set from any of these spatial query methods, we populate our feature collection there. And then we go ahead and clear out our spatial query results layer, and that was that in-memory feature layer that we set up when the application was loaded. And we loop through and add all of the new features returned from our query to that layer, and then redraw the overlay. So this will take that result set, add it to the in-memory feature layer, so they will be drawn as the red country boundaries that you saw earlier here when we were selecting a spatial query rule that actually had a result. So I hope this sample app walkthrough has been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us, or you can post your questions directly on our discussion forums at thinkgeo.com/forums. Thank you for watching.